The Xia dynasty. Considered by ancient historians like Sima Qian as China's first dynasty, the Xia were said to have been founded by the great hero Yu the Great, renowned for taming the catastrophic floods of the Yellow River. His feat wasn't just hydraulic engineering, it was a symbol of virtue, self-sacrifice, and legitimacy. Yu was so respected that the people accepted a hereditary monarchy after his rule, setting the pattern for dynastic succession. Yet the Xia remain elusive. No definitive archaeological evidence has confirmed their existence, but the discovery of the Erlitou culture, with its urban planning, palatial buildings, and bronze tools, may represent a historical basis for the Xia mythos. Whether legend or reality, the Xia symbolize the birth of civilization in China. The Shang dynasty. The Shang dynasty is the first dynasty supported by archaeological proof. Centered in the Yellow River Valley, the Shang were sophisticated in both politics and culture. Their rulers were not only monarchs but high priests, mediating between the human and the spiritual realms. They practiced ancestor worship and recorded divinations on oracle bones, inscribed turtle shells, and ox scapulae, creating the earliest known form of Chinese writing. The Shang were master bronze artisans. Their bronze vessels, often used in ritual ceremonies, display intricate designs that remain artistic marvels today. Society was stratified, with a powerful nobility and a ruling king supported by regional lords. The Shang also waged war frequently, evidenced by mass graves and chariot burials. Despite their power, the Shang eventually fell to a new force, the Zhou. The Zhou dynasty claimed they had overthrown the corrupt Shang king with moral justification. To explain their right to rule, they introduced one of the most enduring political ideas in Chinese history: the mandate of heaven. This doctrine held that heaven granted emperors the right to rule based on their virtue, but it could also be withdrawn if they became tyrants or failed the people. Natural disasters and rebellions were seen as signs that a ruler had lost this mandate. The Zhou ruled longer than any dynasty in Chinese history, but their reign was not continuous or unified. The early Western Zhou period was relatively stable, but over time, central power weakened. The later Eastern Zhou period splintered into dozens, eventually hundreds of competing states, leading to centuries of warfare. This era became known as the Spring and Autumn and Warring States periods. The Spring and Autumn period marks the first half of the Eastern Zhou dynasty. Though the Zhou kings still existed in name, real power had shifted to regional lords or warlords who governed their territories like independent states. Over 100 such states existed, all nominally loyal to the Zhou king, but in reality, they competed, schemed, and fought against one another. This period saw the birth of the 100 schools of thought, including Confucianism, which emphasized filial piety, social order, and the moral duties of rulers and subjects. Taoism, which Laozi advocated living in harmony with the Tao, the natural way of the universe. Mohism, which called for universal love and merit-based leadership. And legalism, which advocated strict laws and harsh punishment. As the Spring and Autumn period ended, China's many small states coalesced into 7 powerful kingdoms: Qi, Chu, Yan, Han, Zhao, Wei, and Qin. This was the Warring States period, a time of bloodshed and transformation. But despite the violence, it was also a golden age for military innovation, statecraft, and philosophy. These kingdoms engaged in almost constant warfare, seeking dominance in a brutal and pragmatic world. Gone were the old codes of honor, replaced by cunning strategies, assassinations, and ruthless reforms. States hired wandering scholars to advise rulers on governance, warfare, and diplomacy. Reformers like Shang Yang in the Qin state implemented legalist reforms such as land redistribution, centralized bureaucracy, and a powerful army based on merit, not aristocracy. Eventually, one state rose above all others: Qin, under the leadership of King Zheng, who would later become Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. The Qin dynasty. Qin Shi Huang brought order to chaos. His vision for unity extended beyond military conquest. He aimed to standardize the entire civilization, such as writing, Different regions used varied scripts. Qin made the small seal script the standard, allowing the bureaucracy to function cohesively across a vast empire. Currency. He introduced a uniform coinage, round bronze coins with a square hole, replacing the patchwork of local currencies. Weights and measures. From grain to axle widths, he imposed standard units, facilitating trade, taxation, and infrastructure. And finally, road systems that he built. To protect the empire from northern nomadic invaders, Qin ordered the connection of pre-existing regional walls, creating the early precursor to the Great Wall of China. This immense project, along with roads and canals, was made possible through massive forced labor, often involving conscripted peasants and prisoners. The construction was brutal. Qin Shi Huang ruled with an iron fist under the philosophy of legalism, which held that people were inherently selfish and needed strict laws, harsh punishments, and strong rulers to maintain order. Books that contradicted the regime, especially Confucian texts, were burned. Scholars who resisted were executed or buried alive. Minor crimes often resulted in severe punishment, including mutilation, slavery, or death. Obsessed with immortality, Qin Shi Huang searched for elixirs and sent expeditions to mythical lands in hopes of cheating death. Ironically, he died at the age of 49 during one such journey. Beneath a massive burial mound lies his tomb complex, still largely unexcavated, said to contain rivers of mercury and a scale replica of his empire. Guarding it is one of China's greatest archaeological treasures, the Terracotta Army, over 8,000 life-sized clay soldiers, each with unique faces, positioned in military formation, ready to defend the emperor in the afterlife. Qin Shi Huang's sudden death threw the empire into disarray. His son, a weak successor manipulated by corrupt officials, could not hold it together. The people, exhausted by forced labor, heavy taxation, and ruthless laws, rebelled. Just 4 years after Qin Shi Huang's death, the dynasty collapsed in flames. Yet the dynasty's institutional legacy produced the centralized imperial system, the idea of standardization as governance, the title of emperor, and the concept of China as a unified state. All these would be inherited and refined by the next great dynasty, the Han. Following the collapse of the short-lived Qin dynasty, a new empire rose from the ashes, one that would define Chinese identity for millennia. The Han dynasty, founded by Liu Bang, later known as Emperor Gaozu, brought a lasting peace to a fractured land and became one of the most important and celebrated dynasties in Chinese history. While the Qin had ruled with fear and legalist rigidity, the Han struck a more balanced approach. Confucianism, once persecuted, now became the official ideology of the state. The idea that rulers should govern through virtue, not just law, took hold. Confucian ideals shaped the civil service system. Candidates were selected for government jobs through examinations based on Confucian texts. Yet legalist administrative techniques were still used in practice, making the Han system a pragmatic blend of ideology and bureaucracy. Under the ambitious Emperor Wu, the Han dynasty expanded its borders dramatically into modern-day Korea, Vietnam, and Central Asia. It was during his reign that China officially opened up to the outside world via the Silk Road. This ancient trade network connected China to the Middle East, India, and even Rome. Han society was hierarchical but relatively mobile. Merchants, though wealthy, were often looked down upon compared to scholars and farmers. Women's roles were largely domestic, though figures like Ban Zhao, a female historian and scholar, left a lasting legacy with her work, Lessons for Women. But no dynasty lasts forever. After centuries of strength, the Han began to decline due to court corruption, tax burdens, and land inequality. Peasant uprisings like the Yellow Turban Rebellion and a series of weak child emperors and puppet rulers. By the late 2nd century, real power was in the hands of warlords. In 220, the last Han emperor abdicated, and the empire fractured into rival kingdoms. The fall of the Han marked the end of China's first great imperial cycle and ushered in one of its most romanticized eras, the Three Kingdoms period. This was a time of war, strategy, and shifting allegiances, when generals, warlords, and scholars battled not just for power, but for survival. So legendary was this era that it inspired one of China's greatest literary epics, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, written over 1,000 years later. The line between fact and fiction often blurs, but the legacy remains vivid in Chinese culture even today. Three rival states emerged, each claiming the mandate of heaven. Wei, founded by Cao Pi, son of the famed general and strategist Cao Cao, who had controlled the Han court in its final years. Wei was the largest and most powerful of the three. Shu led by Liu Bei, a distant relative of the Han royal family. He positioned himself as the rightful heir to the Han legacy. His advisor, Zhuge Liang, became a legendary symbol of wisdom and strategy. Wu ruled by Sun Quan, a pragmatic and capable leader who maintained independence along the Yangtze River Delta. Wu excelled at naval warfare and held the economic powerhouse of the South. These three states clashed, allied, and betrayed one another in a never-ending struggle for dominance. The Romance of the Three Kingdoms would later turn these real historical events into tales of honor, heroism, and betrayal. Characters like Liu Bei, the benevolent leader, Guan Yu, the god of war, known for loyalty and righteousness, and Zhuge Liang, the mastermind advisor, became national icons. To this day, people in East Asia revere these figures not just as historical characters, but as moral archetypes. Temples to Guan Yu are still visited, and Zhuge Liang is quoted as a sage in both politics and war. Eventually, the northern state of Wei gained the upper hand, but in a twist of fate, it wasn't Wei that reunified China. It was a usurping general, Sima Yan, who overthrew Wei and founded the Jin Dynasty. Jin forces soon conquered both Wu and Shu, bringing an end to nearly 60 years of division. With the fall of the Three Kingdoms, China was finally reunified under the Jin Dynasty, but this peace would not last. The next 300 years were a time of division, war, migration, and cultural blending, a complex period that shaped China in subtle but powerful ways. The Western Jin Dynasty was founded by Sima Yan, who declared himself Emperor Wu of Jin after overthrowing the state of Wei. In 280 CE, Jin forces defeated the state of Wu, briefly restoring imperial unity to China. But the Western Jin was plagued by internal power struggles, especially among members of the ruling Sima family. The infamous War of the Eight Princes, a brutal civil war among royal relatives, tore the empire apart from within. Then came disaster. In the early 4th century, nomadic tribes from the north took advantage of the chaos. These tribes, many of whom had lived within China's borders for generations, launched invasions that devastated the north. The fall of the capital, Luoyang, and the mass migration of Han Chinese elites to the south marked a turning point. The Jin court fled south and re-established itself in Jiangkang, modern-day Nanjing, beginning the Eastern Jin Dynasty. Southern and Northern Dynasty. This period is named after the two broad regions that now developed independently. In the south, 4 successive dynasties ruled from Jiankang: Lusong, Southern Qi, Liang, and Chen. In the north, things were more volatile. After the Jin lost control, dozens of kingdoms rose and fell, many of them ruled by Xianbei, Xiongnu, and other non-Han nomadic tribes. But over time, these groups adopted Han customs, intermarried, and even learned Chinese, a process known as Sinicization. Eventually, the northern Wei split into eastern and western Wei, which evolved into 2 successor states, Northern Qi and Northern Zhou. Though this was a time of constant warfare, it was also a melting pot of ideas, ethnicities, and beliefs. Buddhism became deeply embedded in Chinese life, not just as a religion but as a cultural force. Taoism also grew in popularity, and Confucian scholars continued to influence southern courts. The division between civilized South and barbarian North was often reinforced by elites, but the reality was far more complex. Both regions were evolving in their own ways, and both contributed to the richness of Chinese civilization. By the late 6th century, the stage was set for a new unifier. In the north, the northern Zhou conquered the other northern states. In 581 CE, a powerful general named Yang Jian seized the throne, founding the Sui dynasty. By 589, he conquered the south, reunifying China once again after nearly 4 centuries of fragmentation.